First of all, welcome to the channel and thank you for stopping by. When time permits, please consider subscribing. I would greatly appreciate it. For those of you that have seen my FZ1 videos before, and there aren't that many, you may have noticed this is not the cockpit of my 2001 FZ1. I had an opportunity to sell my bike and for very little money more, move over to a Gen 2 model. Now, there were a lot of pluses to the Gen 1 model. One being comfort. It feels like a larger bike. You feel like you're sitting down in it, and the seat is at least as comfortable as any aftermarket I've ever been on. But it did have 4 reasons to sell it, and those 4 reasons were the carburetors. I was experiencing some hard starting, and I know only enough about carburetors to be dangerous, and I can tinker around with a 1-cylinder bike, but I am not qualified to rebuild 4 carburetors. So when I started pricing the work, whenever anyone saw the bike, they're like, huh. And then they'd have to go to talk to someone else in the shop, and then they'd come back with a number that was very high 3 with a warning that it might go over 1,000 if things look worse than they do from the outside of the bike. It turns out in 2021, not too many people are all that familiar with working on a 2001 Yamaha that only sold for a couple of years before they went to electronic fuel injection. So, as much as I loved riding that bike, and I truly did, and I knew I didn't want to go without having a Yamaha FZ1, given the expense I was looking at and the fact that no one was even confident in my area that it was going to be an easy job, I started shopping. Now, there are quite a few Gen 1s around, but the prices range usually from $5,000 to $5,500, maybe $6,500 if it's in mint condition, which is a little more than I could sell my 2001 model for, and I wasn't really looking to spend a whole lot of money on what is my 3rd motorcycle. And as much as I do love, you know, riding up on the mountain and enjoying a good Yamaha FZ1, I don't do it often enough to be spending $5,500 on a bike. So I waited a little bit, and this one popped up 2 days ago at $4,000, and then I was able to get him go just a little bit lower on it, and it was almost a straight swap for what I could get for my 2001 to a gentleman that, God, I hope he can do the carburetors himself. I did warn him. So this is not my first day on a Gen 2. I've absolutely ridden a friend of mine's more than once, and I did enjoy it. This is my first time putting on a lot of miles, though. So far I'm at 132.6 since I picked it up. And I picked it up in Massachusetts. I took it home on the highway, which let me test the speed limits in New York and Massachusetts to see how quickly the bike could get to them. And it certainly accelerates at least as fast as my Gen 1 did. And remarkably, it's smoother than my Gen 1. I always found the Gen 1 to be very smooth with the roll-on, but moving to this, it's just a little bit better. Might be confirmation bias because I just spent thousands of dollars and sold the Gen 1, so I can't do a back-to-back, but it does feel a little bit better. Where it falls through, though, is this bike has a very uncomfortable seat. Definitely a benefit of the Gen 1 is the plush, comfortable seat it comes with. No need for an aftermarket on that bike. This bike, however, in the hour and a half it took me to get home, reminded me just what I knew from borrowing my buddies. It is not a great seat. It is stiff, and it stays stiff the whole time. But an aftermarket seat is going to be significantly less money than a carburetor job, so I will learn to live with it. And there are other benefits to this bike. It definitely feels lighter. I believe it's around 25 pounds lighter, but the feeling moving it in and out of the garage, which is where I really noticed the weight on the 2001, this is just better. It just does not seem like a whale like the other one did. It also appears to have a significantly better turning radius. My garage is not too wide, so when I do a turn with my little bikes, it's very easy to do, but when I was making turns with my FZ1, it just barely made it. It did not have a great turning radius. This bike is significantly easier to turn around and then back into the garage, which is my preference. I couldn't even imagine pushing one of these behemoths out of the garage. So I'll stop in a couple of minutes, take a look at the bike. It is significantly different. They blacked out the engine, which is fantastic. They switched to aluminum. It just looks a little better put together, which I guess is what you would expect from a Generation 2. So I'll pick you back up when we do that. Just wanted to take a moment to go over the differences in the aesthetics between this and the 2001 I had. First and foremost, it just pops with the all black frame and the blacked out engine. The gray and silver of the Gen 1 to me did not look quite this good, but it's got the same lights, same style front, slightly different windshield, but still very similar. The only thing that really takes away from this bike is the Gen 1 had a beautiful, very large titanium exhaust. It looked great, it sounded great, it was subtle so you could still hear the beauty of the inline 4. This one is a much louder exhaust. I think it takes away from the overall sound of the bike, but what can you do? It is what it is. This one does have a slightly wider tire in the rear, and for some people maybe a positive. For me it's a bit of a negative. The pegs are slightly closer, giving you a tighter feeling. So when you're here on the bike, you're sitting as straight as you were before, but your legs are definitely tighter, more sport bike versus touring bike. The biggest improvement for this bike though, hands down, is the steering. This handlebar is beautiful. It is a nice bend. It is comfortable if you want to lean in. It is comfortable if you want to sit back. The angle was about here on the Gen 1, and I just found it terribly uncomfortable. This is fantastic. I've been riding it just hours, and it's fantastic. So comfortable. I will not need to replace these bars like I did on my other bike. The levers are stiff but good, and it is a nice bike. Happy I got it. So far I don't miss my Gen 1, and I don't expect that to change. I'll get used to not having the sweet sound of the 4 quite as up front due to the loud exhaust, but the comfort of this bike, just great. Alright, if you stick around this long, I appreciate it. Thank you. Take care.